Jon Scheyer was on the Devil's Den podcast, Jon Scheyer being the head coach of Duke men's basketball. And he said something that 10 years ago, if the Duke had any coach, if any coach of any Power 5 conference, anything, said what Jon Scheyer said, it would have rocked the sports world. Instead, it kind of came and went with a whimper. If you want to hear it, it's about tampering, transfer portal. Obviously, Duke had a exodus of 7 transfers out of the program. Scheyer on the Devil's Den podcast said this.
It starts with having our antennas up as a staff for who can go in the portal. You know, there were a couple kids we looked at. By the time we saw their names go in the portal and reached out, they already had visits set up. And very shortly after, they had commitments. They made commitments. And we're talking days from the in the portal visit and then being committed. And so, there's tampering all the time. You know, I mean, I could tell you the 7 guys that we had transfer, all 7 of them were contacted throughout the season. And that's just like, that's the way it goes. That's the era we're in. And so you have to just be ready to attack those things in real time.
Tampering is a thing in college sports. It just is. Now, take it into your own hands, right? You used to not have to worry about players leaving your program because they weren't really allowed to leave your program. Once you're aware of it, which obviously Jon Scheyer is, right? He just talked about it about as matter-of-factly as you could possibly talk about it. Like, yeah, all 7 of our guys tampered with. Guys hit the portal, they go to a visit, they commit like a day later. Obviously, tampering's going on. It happens. Once you're aware of it, you can play defense. Here's what I know is not going to happen. NCAA isn't going to do anything.
Oh, no, not at all.
So you can, like, this was not Scheyer, trying to put the word out, like, somebody's got to do something about this. They should look into these 7 schools that took players from me. It was not that. It was just him talking. The NCAA is not going to do anything about it. Don't expect it, right? It's like when you and your sibling are fighting in the back room and you're like, I'm going to go tell mom or I'm going to go tell dad. And you just know, like, we're both back here fighting. What do you think's going to happen? They're not going to do anything. They're not going to punish one of us and not the other of us, right? You don't go crying to the NCAA because they're not going to do anything. You have to play defense with your own players in every way you can, right? Expect them to be tampered with, especially if you play basketball in the ACC. Because your players are mighty attractive to just about every other program. Like, it's not like Duke's player, like, I've told this before, but I played football at the University of Delaware. We used to get transfers from all over the place, right? And usually that meant they weren't playing at their other place or they weren't attractive to whatever place they were. This is not the case. Duke lost 7 players. They went to Ohio State, Baylor, Virginia, Missouri, Stanford, Clemson, and Virginia Tech. Those players had options, right? Those players were desirable. So if you're going to load your roster up with desirable players, which Duke will and every ACC team will, you better be prepared. I'm calling it play defense. The real thing I'm talking about is making sure they're seeing value in being in your program. Everyone's going to be tampered with, which means they're going to have a choice to make, right? They're going to know that if they hit the portal, schools like Ohio State and Baylor and Virginia and Missouri would be waiting there to welcome them. So you have to make sure they choose Duke or whatever school. If it's North Carolina, you have to make sure they choose your school. Even if they're not getting all of the shots, right? Even if they're not the leading scorer, even if they're coming off the bench, they still have to choose you each and every offseason. I've used the term re-recruit. Constantly be re-recruiting your players. Do you know what actually surprised me the most? Right, he said all 7. Jeremy Roach was getting tampered with. If you need a better example of everyone in the gosh darn country is being tampered with, tampering with Jeremy Roach is wild. He was a 4-year starter at Duke. If he is being tampered with, you're darn sure going to have your sixth man being tampered with. Your TJ Powers, right? Your highly recruited guys that weren't playing many minutes. A 4-year starter with 1 year of eligibility was being tampered with, who could have gone pro if he wanted to. Could have been making a nice living in a bunch of different ways.
Could have made a big living staying at Duke.
Could have made a nice living staying right there. Like it is the ultimate. Like I'm gonna call just to see. Right? I'm just like that's how unafraid teams are from whatever the NCAA can do with tampering.
And they skirt around the rules.
Yeah.
They skirt around the rules.
Talk to your high school coach about, like, do you know any point guards that might be out there who might be 6'2", who might have a lot of experience in a power conference?
Hey, do you have any, like, go to one of your players, do you maybe happen to have a former AAU teammate that you played with that happens to be, I don't know, at a Power 5 school that might be looking to get some playing time somewhere else?
Might be looking for a change of pace.
I mean,
like
if that happens, just, let us know.
It's and even like that technically, even that is technically against the rules, but it'll never be able to be proven.
You can't prove it.
It's like you're willing to risk it for Jeremy Roach, who, by the way, from the outside looked like he was a Duke lifer, right? Let's just call a spade a spade. When you start there for 4 years, he's passed up leaving to return and chase national championships and everything. If you're willing to risk it to be like, let's see if this guy will move on. I mean, it has to get to the point. It probably already has, where, if you're on national television and you get subbed out and you like sigh or roll your eyes, by the time you get to the locker room, your phone has to have 4 or 5 text messages. Are you unhappy? Do you not like the way that they're using you? Come to University of blah, 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 where we'll treat you right. Da, 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 on and on and on and on and on. We said this about Duke the other day because somebody wrote in, like, what happens if Duke doesn't win this year because they've gone all in with the Cooper flag and the transfer portal and all this. I said they're treating every year like it's one at a time, right? So maybe that's it. Like, for every player that on your roster that's being tampered with, you're tampering with 6 others, right? Fight fire with fire.
It's the reality of it.
Can you imagine if 10 years ago,
oh, gosh, 5.
Coach K comes out and says, we lost transfers and other teams were talking to them during the season? Mm-hmm. How the world would have lit on fire?
I really wish these coaches would call out of their schools and programs. Put names and faces to it. You want to stop it? Well, start putting names to it.
I guess he could be a little bit more specific, but if you're saying all 7 players were tampered with, I mean, I'm sure at least some of those accusations come from the teams they ended up on.
Possibly.
Yeah.
But say, hey, you know what?
I guess they could have been tampered with other programs, then once they hit the portal committed, so it's not a direct, yeah,
but just call them out. Call them out. Like, hey, you know what?
My player heard from Texas.
Exactly. Hey, Texas is calling my guy right now. Or
hypothetical.
Whatever. Yeah. Name your school. Creighton's contacting my dude.
Can you imagine? Tyrese Proctor has a big game in middle of December, post-game press conference. Yeah, Proctor just scored 30. By the time he got to his locker room, let's look at the text messages. They're in the post-game press conference.
Show it.
Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, Arkansas.
The reason why coaches won't do it is because they're afraid of their own veil getting lifted in front of about what they're doing. It's like, oh, really? Because I got ghosts in the closet too, or skeletons in the closet.
Some assistant coach said something somewhere, and all of a sudden their spot's blown up.
There's an equipment manager out there that's all of a sudden doing something.
One of their players went rogue and tried to recruit a friend, which does happen, by the way.
Oh, it happens all the time.
That's actually illegal, by the way.
That is.
If just the player's recruiting a player with no contact with the coach. Why it's such a shades of gray situation.
Mm-hmm.